Is that the time already?
Afraid so. Time flies.
We should wrap up.
Agreed. Good work.
Have you ever had that moment when everything you thought you knew suddenly flips upside down? When the person you've been silently judging turns out to be fighting battles you never imagined? If this story resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe to see more real-life plot twists that'll make you rethink everything. The first time I saw him lose his temper, I labeled him as just another entitled boss. "Emma, I need you to finish up early today," Mr. Calloway announced, appearing suddenly at my desk, his voice tight with what I assumed was impatience. He was straightening his tie, and I noticed he'd changed into a fresh shirt sometime in the afternoon. "The quarterly reports can wait until tomorrow." I glanced at my computer screen, 4:30 p.m. I still had an hour and a half left on my shift, and the reports were due to our clients first thing tomorrow. I'd been planning to stay late to finish them. "But sir, the Henderson account." I said it can wait. He cut me off, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I have personal matters to attend to this evening." From my cubicle, I could see into his office where he was spraying cologne and checking his reflection in his phone camera. A date. My boss was kicking me out early because he had a date. "Of course, Mr. Calloway," I replied, trying to keep the irritation from my voice. I began gathering my things, making a mental note to come in extra early tomorrow to compensate for his inconsideration. As I packed up, I heard Diane from accounting whisper to Jen from HR, "Third time this month he's left early. Must be nice being the boss." I nodded in silent agreement. In the 6 months I'd been working as executive assistant at Calloway Financial Services, I'd noticed a pattern. At least once a week, Mr. Calloway would abruptly end the workday, always with that same tense expression, always with some vague excuse about personal matters. The thing was, in every other respect, Lucas Calloway was an exemplary boss. Fair, understanding, brilliant with clients. He paid well above market rate and had implemented flexible working hours for parents on staff. But these mysterious early departures were becoming a point of office gossip. As I walked to the elevator, Mr. Calloway was right behind me, checking his watch nervously. "Big date tonight?" I asked, immediately regretting my unprofessional tone. He looked startled, then his expression softened slightly. "Something like that," he murmured, then checked his phone and frowned at whatever message he'd received. We rode down in uncomfortable silence. In the lobby, he nodded a curt goodbye and practically sprinted to his car. I sighed, watching him drive away. At 28, I was only about 10 years younger than him, but the gap felt wider. He lived in that world of successful people with their important lives and romantic entanglements, while I was still trying to figure out how to balance my student loans with my rent. But as I walked to my car, I realized something. For once, I actually had plans tonight too. After 3 years of focusing solely on my career and nothing else, I had finally agreed to a date. My college roommate had been trying to set me up with her husband's friend for months, and I'd finally relented. Maybe Mr. Calloway's inconsideration was a blessing in disguise. Now I had time to go home and actually put some effort into getting ready. 2 hours later, I was sitting at a small table in Bellini's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown that I'd never have chosen myself. My date, Michael, was handsome in that polished, corporate way, perfect haircut, expensive watch, practiced smile. He worked in investment banking and had spent the first 20 minutes telling me about his recent promotion. "So that's enough about me," he said finally, taking a sip of his wine. "Emma, what do you do?" I was about to answer when movement near the entrance caught my eye. Mr. Calloway had just walked in, but he wasn't with a glamorous date as I'd imagined. He was holding the hand of a small boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with the same dark curls and serious expression as my boss. "Emma?" Michael prompted. "Sorry," I said, dragging my attention back to my date. "I work as an executive assistant at a financial services firm." As Michael launched into a monologue about how his assistant could never keep his calendar straight, I found my gaze drifting back to Mr. Calloway and the boy. They were being seated at a table across the restaurant. The child looked pale and was moving slowly. Mr. Calloway was being uncharacteristically gentle, helping the boy into his chair, then taking a seat where he could keep a close eye on him. "Are you listening?" Michael asked, his tone sharpening. "Yes, sorry," I said. "Your assistant mixed up your meetings with Johnson Corporation." He seemed satisfied and continued his story, but I couldn't focus. I watched as a waiter brought a special meal to the boy that didn't appear to be on the regular menu. Mr. Calloway was cutting the food into small pieces, speaking softly to the child who nodded weakly. This didn't look like any regular father-son dinner. Something was wrong. "Excuse me," I said to Michael, standing up. "I need to use the restroom." I made my way across the restaurant, timing my path to pass by Mr. Calloway's table. As I got closer, I could hear him speaking. "Just 3 more bites, Ethan. The doctor said you need to keep your strength up before tomorrow." "I'm not hungry, Dad," the boy said, his voice small and tired. "I know, buddy. But remember what we talked about? We need to be brave for." He stopped abruptly when he noticed me standing there. His expression shifted from tender concern to shock, then embarrassment, and finally to something that looked almost like anger. "Emma," he said stiffly. "Enjoying your evening?" "Mr. Calloway," I replied, equally formal. "I didn't expect to see you here." The boy, Ethan, looked up at me curiously. "Are you Dad's friend from work?" Before I could answer, Mr. Calloway cut in. "This is Miss Pearson, my assistant. Emma, this is my son, Ethan." I smiled at the boy. "It's very nice to meet you, Ethan." He gave me a small smile in return, and I noticed dark circles under his eyes that no child should have. "Dad says you're really good at organizing things. He says the office would fall apart without you." I blinked in surprise, glancing at Mr. Calloway, who looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. "That's very kind of him to say," I managed. "Emma," a voice called from behind me. Michael had appeared at my elbow, looking annoyed. "Our appetizers arrived." "Oh, right," I said. "Mr. Calloway, Ethan, this is Michael. Michael, this is my boss and his son." Michael gave them a cursory nod, clearly impatient to return to our table and his stories about himself. "We shouldn't interrupt your family dinner," I said to Mr. Calloway. "Have a good evening." As Michael practically dragged me back to our table, I glanced over my shoulder. Mr. Calloway was watching us, his expression unreadable. Throughout the rest of dinner, I found myself constantly looking over at their table. Ethan barely ate, despite Mr. Calloway's gentle encouragement. At one point, the boy seemed to grow dizzy, and Mr. Calloway immediately had his arm around him, stabilizing him, his face a mask of barely controlled fear. This was not a casual dinner. This was something else entirely. Michael noticed my distraction and grew increasingly irritated. When he suggested we skip dessert and go back to his place, I declined as politely as I could. His charm evaporated instantly. "You've been checking out your boss all night," he said accusingly. "If you weren't interested, you shouldn't have agreed to this date." "It's not like that," I protested, but he was already signaling for the check. We parted ways at the restaurant entrance with stiff goodbyes and mutual relief. As I waited for my Uber, I saw Mr. Calloway emerge, carrying Ethan in his arms. The boy had fallen asleep, his head resting on his father's shoulder. Mr. Calloway moved carefully, as if his son might break. Our eyes met briefly across the sidewalk. There was no anger now, just exhaustion and something that looked like resignation. He gave me a small nod before turning away to his car. I stood there watching them, feeling like I'd glimpsed something I wasn't supposed to see, not because it was scandalous, but because it was sacred. The next morning, I arrived at the office early as planned. Mr. Calloway wasn't in yet, which was unusual. He was typically the first to arrive. I threw myself into finishing the Henderson reports, and by the time the rest of the staff began trickling in, I had them ready to send. At 9:30, Mr. Calloway still hadn't arrived. At 10 o'clock, I received a text message from him. "Emma, won't be in today. Please reschedule my appointments. We'll call later with updates." No explanation, no details. Just like always. But now, after what I'd seen last night, the terseness felt different. Diane from accounting stopped by my desk around lunchtime. "Boss man playing hooky again?" she asked with a knowing smirk. Something protective flared in me. "He's dealing with important personal matters," I said firmly. She raised an eyebrow at my tone. "Right. Personal matters. That's what they all say." I bit back a sharper response and turned back to my computer. The office gossip suddenly felt not just unprofessional but cruel. At 3 p.m., my phone rang. "Mr. Calloway." "Emma," he said, his voice rough with fatigue. "I need a favor." "Of course, sir. I need you to bring some files to me. The Westridge proposal and the Henderson reports. I'm at Memorial Children's Hospital, 5th floor." My heart sank. "I'll be there as soon as possible." "Thank you," he said, then added, "Emma, about last night." "No explanation needed, sir," I interrupted gently. "I'll see you soon." The pediatric oncology floor of Memorial Children's Hospital was painted in cheerful colors that couldn't quite mask the heaviness in the air. I found Mr. Calloway, Lucas, as I was beginning to think of him, sitting in a chair outside a patient room, his head in his hands. He looked up as I approached, and I was shocked by his appearance. He seemed to have aged years overnight, with stubble darkening his jaw and his usually immaculate clothes rumpled. "You brought the files," he said, standing up. "Thank you." I handed him the folder. "How is Ethan?" He glanced at the closed door behind him. "They're doing some tests. It's not good." I waited, not wanting to pry but letting him know I was willing to listen. "Leukemia," he said finally, the word falling between us like a stone. "Diagnosed 8 months ago. We thought the first round of treatment worked, but..." He trailed off, swallowing hard. "It's back, and it's aggressive. 8 months. Almost exactly how long I'd been working for him." "The personal matters," I said softly. "The early departures. Doctor appointments. Treatment sessions. Days when he was too sick for school and needed me at home." He ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't want it to become office gossip. Ethan hates being the sick kid. I wanted to protect his privacy." "Of course," I said, feeling ashamed of my previous judgments. "I understand. Last night was supposed to be a special dinner. His favorite restaurant before." Lucas's voice broke. "Before he starts the new treatment protocol today. When I saw you there with your date, I just..." "You were upset," I finished for him. "I get it. I was intruding on your time with Ethan." He shook his head. "It wasn't just that. It was seeing you out there, living your life, having a normal evening while I'm..." He gestured helplessly at the hospital corridor. "I was jealous," he admitted. And then I felt guilty for being jealous, which made me angry, and, "It's been a long 8 months, Emma." Before I could respond, the door opened, and a nurse appeared. "Mr. Calloway? Ethan's asking for you." Lucas straightened immediately, all vulnerability vanishing as he prepared to be strong for his son. "I'll be right there." He turned to me. "Thank you for bringing these. You should get back to the office." "Actually," I said, making a decision, "I'd like to stay. If that's okay. I can work on these reports while you're with Ethan, and maybe I could meet him properly. When he's feeling up to it." Lucas looked surprised, then grateful. "He'd like that. He doesn't get many visitors besides me and his grandparents. Where's his mother? I asked before I could stop myself. A shadow crossed Lucas's face. She left when he was 3. Decided parenthood wasn't for her after all. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. He shrugged. It's been just us for a long time now. We manage. He glanced at the door. I should go in. I'll be right here, I promised. That evening became the first of many I spent at the hospital. At first, I just brought work files and updates, sitting in the waiting room while Lucas spent time with Ethan. But gradually, I was invited into their world. Ethan was a remarkable child, bright, funny, and impossibly brave. Despite the harsh treatments that left him weak and sick, he maintained a curiosity about everything. He loved space, dinosaurs, and surprisingly complex board games that he usually beat me at. Dad says you're really smart, he told me one evening as we played chess in his hospital room while Lucas stepped out to take a call. Your dad is pretty smart himself, I replied, watching him confidently capture my knight. Yeah, but he says you think of things he doesn't. Ethan looked up at me with those serious eyes so like his father's. He says you see people differently than he does. I wasn't sure how to respond to that. Everyone sees things a little differently, I guess. Ethan nodded sagely. Dad only sees the big picture sometimes. You see the little things too. Out of the mouths of babes, I thought. Over the weeks that followed, the boundaries between professional and personal blurred. I started bringing dinner to the hospital on late treatment days. I created a color-coded medication and appointment schedule that Lucas could access on his phone. When Ethan had good days and could go home, I sometimes stopped by with groceries or just to give Lucas a chance to shower and rest while I kept Ethan company. The office gossip shifted. People noticed the change in my relationship with the boss, but not in the way they might have expected. There were no romantic rumors, just a gradual understanding that whatever personal matters Mr. Calloway was dealing with, I was now somehow involved. Diane from accounting cornered me in the break room one day. So what's really going on with you and Calloway? She asked bluntly. I considered deflecting but decided on honesty, or at least, a version of it that respected Lucas and Ethan's privacy. Mr. Calloway is dealing with a family health crisis, I said quietly. I'm helping out where I can. Her expression softened immediately. Oh. I didn't realize. Is it serious? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Well, she said, suddenly awkward, that's good of you, Emma. Let me know if there's anything the rest of us can do. Word spread quickly after that. The office atmosphere changed. People stopped questioning Lucas's absences and started covering for him without being asked. Small gestures appeared, Jen from HR leaving homemade soup in the break room fridge with his name on it, the IT team setting up a better remote access system so he could work from the hospital more easily. Lucas noticed. You told them, he said one evening as we sat in the hospital cafeteria during one of Ethan's procedures. Not the details, I assured him. Just that you're dealing with a family health situation. People want to help, Lucas. It was the first time I'd used his first name to his face. He didn't seem to notice. I've spent so long handling everything alone, he said, staring into his coffee cup. After Melissa left, I got used to it being just me and Ethan against the world. It doesn't have to be that way, I said gently. He looked up at me then, really looked at me, as if seeing something new. No, he agreed softly. I'm starting to understand that. 3 months after that night at the restaurant, Ethan had a bad turn. The new treatment protocol wasn't working as hoped, and he developed an infection that his weakened immune system couldn't fight. Lucas called me at 2 a.m., his voice tight with panic. They're moving him to intensive care, he said. Emma, I can't do this alone. I'm on my way, I promised, already pulling on clothes. I found Lucas pacing the ICU waiting room, looking utterly lost. When he saw me, something in him seemed to break. I opened my arms, and he fell into them, his body shaking with silent sobs. "I can't lose him," he whispered against my shoulder. "He's everything." I held him, feeling my own tears fall. In those months, Ethan had become important to me too, his courage, his humor, his old soul wisdom wrapped in a child's curiosity. "He's strong," I reminded Lucas. "And he has you fighting for him. That counts for a lot." We spent that night in uncomfortable waiting room chairs, Lucas's hand gripping mine like a lifeline. Toward dawn, the doctor emerged with cautious good news: Ethan had stabilized. The antibiotics were working. He wasn't out of danger, but he was fighting. When we were finally allowed to see him, Ethan looked impossibly small among the machines and tubes. But his eyes fluttered open when Lucas spoke his name, and he managed a weak smile when he saw me. "You came," he whispered. "Of course I did," I said, carefully taking his hand, mindful of the four. "Someone has to make sure your dad remembers to eat." That earned me a tiny smile. "He forgets a lot." "I know. It's a good thing he has us to remind him." Ethan's eyes drifted between me and his father, and something like understanding flickered in his gaze before exhaustion pulled him back to sleep. Lucas and I established a rotation after that. One of us was always at the hospital while the other handled work matters. The office staff rallied around us, covering meetings, extending deadlines, bringing food and coffee and changes of clothes. Gradually, Ethan improved. The infection cleared. The doctors adjusted his treatment plan. There were good days among the bad ones, days when he could sit up and play games, when his appetite returned, when his laugh echoed in the hospital room. On one such good day, about 4 months after that first dinner at Bellini's, Ethan asked a question that caught both Lucas and me off guard. "Are you guys in love?" Lucas choked on his coffee. I froze with a puzzle piece halfway to the board. "What?" Lucas managed. Ethan rolled his eyes with all the exasperation an 8-year-old could muster. "I'm sick, not blind, Dad. You look at Emma the way Peter Parker looks at MJ." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. Lucas and I had grown close, certainly. The boundaries between boss and employee had long since dissolved. We'd held each other through tears, celebrated small victories, fallen asleep on each other's shoulders during long hospital nights. But we'd never discussed what any of it meant. "Buddy, that's not," Lucas began. "It's okay if you are," Ethan continued earnestly. "I like Emma. She makes you smile more. And she always remembers to cut the crusts off my sandwiches." "Those are very important qualities," I agreed, trying to lighten the moment. Lucas met my eyes across the hospital bed, and something unspoken passed between us, a question, a possibility. "Ethan," he said carefully, "Emma and I are good friends. She's been an incredible help to both of us." "But you could be more," Ethan persisted. "I heard Nurse Jen telling Dr. Marcus that you two are obviously crazy about each other but too stubborn to admit it." "Hospital gossip," Lucas muttered, but his ears had turned red. I decided to rescue him. "Ethan, your dad and I have been focused on you getting better. That's what matters right now." Ethan considered this, then nodded. "Okay. But when I'm better, you should definitely go on a date. A real one, not just hospital cafeteria sandwiches." "We'll take that under advisement," Lucas said, ruffling his son's hair. The moment passed, but something had shifted. That night, as we walked to the parking garage together, Lucas stopped me with a gentle hand on my arm. "About what Ethan said. Kids say the darndest things," I offered lightly. "Emma." His voice was serious. "These past months. I don't know what I would have done without you." "You would have managed," I said. "You're stronger than you think." "Maybe. But I'm glad I didn't have to find out." He took a deep breath. When this is all over, when Ethan is better, I'd like to take you to dinner. A proper dinner, not as your boss, not as Ethan's dad, but as a man who has fallen in love with an extraordinary woman. My heart stuttered. Lucas. You don't have to answer now, he said quickly. I know the timing is terrible. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is complicated. But I needed you to know. I looked at this man who had become so important to me, this father who fought tirelessly for his son, this boss who had become a partner, this friend who had let me into the most vulnerable parts of his life. Yes, I said simply. Yes? Yes, I'll have dinner with you when Ethan is better. And yes, I've fallen in love with you too. His smile then was like sunrise after the longest night. 2 more months passed. Ethan's condition improved steadily. The doctors began using words like remission and recovery. He was released from the hospital, though he still had regular treatments and checkups. Life began to find a new rhythm. I spent more time at Lucas and Ethan's home than at my own apartment. We established routines, medication schedules, homework sessions, movie nights where Ethan would inevitably fall asleep between us on the couch. At work, Lucas officially promoted me to operations manager, acknowledging the expanded role I'd taken on during the crisis. The office staff, who had become something like an extended family during Ethan's illness, celebrated with a surprise party. Told you they were in love, I overheard Diane telling Jen as they arranged cupcakes. Pay up. Some things never change, I thought with a smile. 6 months to the day after that fateful dinner at Bellini's, Lucas and I returned there, this time, together. Ethan was having a sleepover at his grandparents', his first since getting sick. His latest scans had been clear. He was gaining weight, regaining energy, returning to school part-time. To new beginnings, Lucas said, raising his glass to mine. To seeing the whole picture, I replied, remembering Ethan's words about his father only seeing the big things. Lucas smiled. I was so wrong about you, you know. That first night here, when I saw you with that guy. Michael, I supplied. Worst date ever, by the way. I was jealous, he admitted. Not just because you were out living your life while mine was falling apart, but because you were with him. I'd noticed you at work, how couldn't I, but I'd kept things professional. Seeing you here, looking beautiful, laughing with someone else, it hit me harder than I expected. And here I thought you were just an entitled boss making me leave early for a hot date, I teased. Well, I was with the most important person in my life, he said. Just not in the way you thought. He still is the most important person, I said seriously. That's how it should be. Lucas reached across the table for my hand. There's room in my heart for both of you. Ethan knows that. He's been trying to set us up for months. I laughed. He's a wise little matchmaker. He wants me to propose, you know, Lucas said casually. He's been researching ring styles online. My heart skipped. Lucas. Don't worry, he said quickly. I told him these things take time. That we need to do this right. He squeezed my hand. But I want you to know that I see a future with you, Emma. The 3 of us, together. I see it too, I admitted. And it looks beautiful. 1 year after that first night at Bellini's, we returned again, this time with Ethan, officially in remission, proudly wearing a bow tie for the occasion. Is tonight the night, Dad? He whispered loudly as we were seated at our table, the same one where I'd first seen them together. Lucas shot him a warning look, but I pretended not to hear, hiding my smile behind the menu. After dessert, a chocolate lava cake that Ethan devoured with the enthusiasm of a child who had regained his appetite and then some, Lucas cleared his throat. Ethan and I have something to ask you, he said, suddenly serious. Ethan was practically vibrating with excitement. Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emma Pearson, this past year has shown me what true strength looks like. You stepped into our lives when we were at our lowest and helped us find our way back to the light. You've become essential to us both. He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. Will you marry me? Will you officially become part of our family? Tears blurred my vision. Yes, I managed. Yes to both of you. As Lucas slipped the ring onto my finger, Ethan launched himself from his chair to hug us both. I told you she'd say yes, Dad. I told you. Around us, the restaurant erupted in applause. I looked up to see the same waiter who had served Lucas and Ethan that first night, smiling knowingly at us. Congratulations, he said. I had a feeling about you three. Later that night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, exhausted from excitement, Lucas and I stood on the balcony of their, soon-to-be our, home. A year ago, I thought my world was ending, Lucas said softly. Ethan was sick, I was drowning in fear and responsibility, and I was pushing everyone away because I couldn't bear to let anyone see how scared I was. And now? I asked, leaning into his embrace. Now I know that sometimes the worst moments lead you to the best ones. That sometimes what looks like an inconsiderate boss kicking you out early is actually a devoted father doing his best, I finished. And sometimes what looks like an intrusion on a private dinner is actually the beginning of the most important relationship of your life, he completed. We stood there in comfortable silence, watching the city lights below, thinking of the journey that had brought us here, from boss and assistant, to friends, to family. You know, I said after a while, I never did thank you for kicking me out early that day. Lucas laughed. No? If you hadn't, I might never have made it to that terrible date with Michael. And if I hadn't been on that terrible date, we might never have found our way here, he acknowledged. So I guess I should thank my jealousy. And I should thank my curiosity, I added. And we should both thank Ethan's matchmaking skills. To plot twists, Lucas said, kissing my forehead. To plot twists, I agreed, turning in his arms to kiss him properly. The best kind. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life tales that remind us how quickly life can change, how a moment of misunderstanding can lead to the greatest understanding of all, and how sometimes, the family we need finds us when we least expect it. Remember, not every boss who asks you to leave early is being inconsiderate. Sometimes, they're fighting battles you can't see. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, those battles become yours too, not as burdens to bear, but as privileges to share with those who matter most.